Good morning, everyone. And on behalf of the Women in Business Club, thank you very much for being with us today. After a tough year of fully remote events and screens interactions, we are thrilled to open our brand new in-person Trailblazer series with a truly special guest. We see so many women in the room today, and we know you're here because you're eager to learn, share, and be inspired by businesswomen who are as passionate as yourselves. The Women in Business Club is run by student volunteers from our school who want you to succeed in that journey and offer you opportunities to explore your purpose. With this in mind, we are sure that you will remember today as a highlight of your LBS journey. Without further ado, I am happy to welcome Dean Francois, who will introduce our extraordinary speaker. Thank you so much for being here today.
It's so nice to see the full room, and so wonderful. Thank you so much, all of you, for taking the time to join us. You said we're here to learn, to share, and get connected. And I want to thank the Women in Business Club for organizing this brilliant event. I was telling them earlier that it's my 5th year as a dean here, and every year I've been stunned by the quality of the event that our students organized. Thank you so much. You are continuing on this tradition. And if I could ask all of you now to please join me in welcoming Indra Nooyi to the stage. Yeah? Here she is. Indra, you should know we did not rehearse this, and there was no sign up here saying applause now. This was totally spontaneous. You are a superstar. Thank you for being here, and I hope you sense the admiration and the love that there is for you here in the room. Of course, it starts with your business success, and I was really interested to find out that you did hesitate about going between General Electrics and PepsiCo. And your background was much more General Electrics, but you love the culture at PepsiCo, and that's why you did so. And then we know what happened there. And we so appreciate that there's something really nice about the simplicity, about performance with a purpose, and at the same time, the complexity and the breadth of all that it means. And it's nice to see that you actually made it work. And so for that, we thank you for being here as a role model in London Business School for our community. We also appreciate, of course, that you come here and you decided to connect your visit to your book tour. And we want to work with you in making sure your book beats your expectations, as not just being an opportunity for you to influence the world, but for others to connect with you and together with you influence the world. And I hope that you will think of all my colleagues and friends and our students as allies with you in this movement. These are people who are exceptional and outstanding. We know because we select them. And it's not so easy to come here, actually. They can tell you about that. But what we do in selecting them, of course, we look at their achievements, academic and beyond, but we also look at their ambition. And do they want with us to have a profound impact on the way the world does business and the way business impacts the world? And so rest assured, this is not a school that trains you how to make money no matter what. It's about having a profound impact on the way the world does business and on the way business impacts the world. So I hope that in your visit, you'll get a true feel for that. What's embarrassing for me as the dean is they do it so well and in so many ways that I always have to struggle to figure out which stories to pick. But there are plenty of those. So I hope that out of this visit, you'll get a sense of the connection. You'll understand how welcome you are here as a business role model and as a beacon of light in our world that maybe will aggregate our efforts so that together we can make a difference. Thank you very much. And with that, I just want to say again a thank you to all of you for taking the time. This is LBS at its best, right? when our students and our staff and our faculty and our alumni all come together to together learn, share, and get engaged so that we can have a profound impact on the world. So thank you for joining us, and you are in great hands.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much to Dean, Francois. Just checking the sound is good for everyone at the back as well. Great. So I hope you felt the true excitement and buzz of you being here, Indra, today as you walked through the aisle. And I know this is such a special event on so many ways, post-pandemic, but also just for who you are and who you represent to the student body, particularly to the women and the Women in Business Club.
Thank you for having me, and thank you, Dean, for those lovely comments. It's great to be here.
We're going to spend 45 minutes just going through some key questions from my life in full, really touching on some of your real successes, but also some of your hurdles that you had in your journey. And then I'll open to the floor to the audience for some questions as well, so you get also your opportunity to ask Indra those things that really made you think about her career and her journey. But I want to start at the very beginning. So in Madras, in India, you talk about your childhood really fondly. But two things that really came across to me in your childhood was your family and your education, you know, the real focus on education. And there was sort of three key figures growing up, at least from the book, was your mother, your father, and particularly your paternal grandfather, Tata. And you described them as giving you the foundation, the confidence, and the wings to fly. And I thought that was an incredible way to sort of describe the elders of your family. But from your childhood, what do you think was the most formative part, and how did that propel you in your career?
So let me sort of abstract from my childhood and sort of paint the picture. I was born 8 years after India got independence. 8 years, so long, long time ago. And India was a new country, just coming into its own. Women were still, you know, the homemakers. If you had women, they were really teachers and little else. And usually the teachers were the Anglo-Indian people who were left behind in India. So the Indian people, the local people, the women were all housemakers. So it was an interesting time. And the country itself was trying to figure out what's the education system going to be, how do we bring people to be teachers, to be professionals. So in retrospect, I realized how profound the time was. At that time, you were just a kid. You were a kid in a family. You just grew up. Interestingly, I grew up in a family where the men said that the women should be allowed to do whatever they wanted. They should not be held back.
Yeah.
And that's very important, because you don't give birth to a daughter and say, I just gave birth to a lifelong unpaid laborer, right? That's what many families do. They say, we've got an unpaid laborer for life. Some other family is going to get her. It's not even for my family, because she's going to get married off. She's going to be an unpaid laborer for life there. That's not why you give birth to a daughter. You give birth to a daughter to say, I gave birth to this lovely child. Why not let her soar? Why not let her do whatever she wants? Whatever she chooses to do. If she wants to be a homemaker, that's fine. But if she wants to do something else, let her do it. That's what it should be. When I was growing up, that's how it was.
Yeah.
Okay? But then it was not all rosy, because I had a mom who also didn't go to college, brilliant lady, and decided that she had to listen to the men. She too wanted to live life vicariously to the daughters, but she also had to comply with society. So she was there with her sisters talking about horoscopes and getting her daughters married at 18. So I knew all the horoscopes that were being looked at. At the same time, we are soaring, you know. So it was just living in contrasts.
And I would love to pick up on that point, actually, because you have a really interesting relationship with your mother, and you describe it a lot in the book. And you used to describe your mother as having one foot on the accelerator, propelling you to your education, propelling you through your career, and then one foot on the brake, kind of making sure that as a South Asian woman, you were adhering to some of the traditional and cultural expectations of you as a mother, as a child rearer. So how did you deal with those sort of competing priorities on you and your identity?
We were just grateful that she had a foot on the accelerator, and my father and grandfather pressed it even harder, because had she put her foot down and said it's the brake and nothing else, we wouldn't have been able to progress. So the fact that she had one foot in the accelerator was good. So at that point, remember, we had no reference set where other people were allowed to soar and they were doing great. We were the flag bearers of soaring women. And so we couldn't take refuge in saying, look, those neighbors' kids, girls are doing well, or somebody else down the street. Everybody was being match made at age 18, and they were doing all the housework. And in fact, they weren't allowed to do the adventurous things we were allowed to do. So we were just thrilled to
have that opportunity.
I mean, what we had, and this gets to the broader lesson, we had a frame within which we had to operate. We were given infinite freedom within the frame. But if we violated the rules of the frame, then the frame got tighter. So as long as we lived within those rules, it was good. What were the big takeaways from my growing up? First, families are very, very important. Very important. They give you foundation, and when everything fails, you've got family. So we should never underestimate the importance of family. Whatever family means, you know, in those days it was a definition of a family. Today, the definition of a family may be different, but we have to recreate that belonging and that sense of support in some shape or form in our communities. Second, families are messy. I don't know of a single family that doesn't have some complications. So families are messy. Families are fragile.
Yeah.
You don't know when your family is going to be perturbed by something. COVID upset a lot of families. In my case, it was my father's accident. Fortunately, he recovered and went back to work. But had he not, our whole history would have changed. So families are fragile. And in a family, the men and women have to be educated. And they have to have both the power of the purse. If that doesn't happen, families disintegrate. So I think we should focus not just on my upbringing, but more what it means for all of us going forward.
Yeah.
And the last one is a tough one. The roof over the head made all the difference. The fact that we had one house, and even though we don't live in it, the fact that that house existed and we could always go back there gave us a level of confidence that anything fails for us anywhere, we could go back to that house. And it gave us that roof over our head. I don't know if you all have read the book Evicted. There's a great book that was written in the US. I've forgotten the author's name. Maybe, Simi, you can look it up. It talks about the importance of a roof over the head and how, poor families in the US, when they don't have a roof and they're constantly evicted from their homes, it impacts the fundamental confidence and the lifestyle of people. Completely. Because they don't know where to end up next. So even if it's a small home, having a roof over your head that you can call home is very, very important as we rebuild communities.
And I think that kind of both those points, family and home, all rest on this idea of providing people stability, particularly women, exactly to then give them the opportunity to go and soar. Right. So once they have that stability, then the ability to move forward. I want to pick up quickly on the point that you're definitely a trailblazer, in multiple respects, and particularly for a lot of the women in the room. But also around the world, you're known as a trailblazer for Indians. You went over to America, you really lived the American dream and got to the very top, and being the first CEO immigrant as well to run a Fortune 50 company. How did you work with that identity as an Indian in your career, and how were you always authentic to it as you moved through your career as well?
When I went to the US in 1978, there were hardly any women in corporate America, I should say. Women were graduating from business schools. Even in my class at Yale, there were 25% of the class was women, okay? Yeah. So that was a good number then.
That's
in
higher
1978,
than
very, very good. A little bit more than 50 now, but it was a very good number. But you've seen the HBR article about the mommy track, many women leaving the workforce. If you haven't read it, you should. It's an interesting read in retrospect. And it was a very well-written article based on facts. What percentage of women from HBS were sticking around and how many just dropped out of the workforce. So I came into a workforce where I had hardly any women peers, no women bosses, and there I am looking completely different than everybody else in the workforce. And I started my career in Chicago. So all my clients were in Midwestern towns, in Wisconsin, in Michigan, in Minnesota. And I just got an email from one of my BCG consultants who used to work with me. And he said, oh, the story of you and me in Waterloo, Iowa is not in the book. the story goes like this. I was working for a trust company as a client, and this young kid had to set up meetings for me in various Midwestern towns to talk about the trust business. And we went to Waterloo, Iowa, to the Waterloo Trust Bank. It's a very good bank. After the meeting, we went to a restaurant, and the entire restaurant put their forks down because they'd never seen somebody like me walk into that restaurant.
Wow.
So you can imagine me, I'm trying to be brave and say, no, it's going to be just fine. But everybody's looking like, who is she? What is she doing here? Okay? And remember, I was also dressed kind of weird because my clothes didn't fit quite well. But it doesn't matter. I held my head straight with my old, you guys don't carry these things. We had men's briefcases we carried those days. I walked in very proud, put it down, and I ordered something vegetarian to eat. Talk about my Indianness. I'm still a vegetarian, don't drink, don't smoke. So I haven't yet become with the times. But it was tough. It was tough to navigate through all these towns where I was so different. I was a vegetarian, so most of the time I didn't have enough to eat. You know, you all live in a time where vegetarianism is common. In my time, there was no vegetarian food in any town. I was in Neenah, Wisconsin, Appleton, Wisconsin. When I asked for vegetarian, they would take out the steak and give me the mashed potatoes and the peas. Right in front of me, they would literally take out the steak and say, here's the vegetarian. And that used to be my meal.
Yeah.
Okay, so there were days I would go home so hungry because I didn't know what to eat. So I went through some interesting times. I'd walk around with, for those of you who are Indian, with a bottle of pickles just to spice up that mashed potato. I mean, that was my life. And so those were tough times, you know. It was lonely. I felt different. The one thing that it did for me, though, I had the immigrant fear. And when I went anywhere, I assumed I was in a hole. I said, they're looking at me like I'm different because I'm different. They're also asking themselves the question, what is she doing in this room advising me? What is she going to know about American business? And remember, at BCG, we were not advising people on the shop floor. We were actually advising C-suite executives. And I show up with the team, and I assumed they were thinking that BCG must have made some sort of a mistake to bring this woman in. And so I had to dig myself out of the hole first and then demonstrate my capability. So I had to do better than anybody else, I thought, in order to earn my place at that table. And that's what resulted in me doing well, because clients kept saying, I'd like Indra. And so I went from me feeling terrible about myself to clients saying, oh, Indra has to take 3 months off to have a child, we'll put the case on hold. I can't tell you how many clients put the cases on hold and said, let's just hold the case, let her come back, and then we will continue.
I really
unheard of.
Yeah, and particularly in, you know, I think corporates and the way that they're treating people now is very different. But in your time, I imagine clients holding projects, corporates not like...
Unheard of, absolutely. BCG giving me 6 months paid leave when my father was dying. Didn't even bat an eyelid. They just called and said, take up to 6 months. Now listen, in 3 months my father was gone, I went back to work. When I was in a car accident, BCG said, take as much time as you need, all paid. So I had the benefit of all of that support. But for me, I never forgot that I was an Indian immigrant. Yeah. I never forgot that. And even today, you know, I hate to say it, I still have that immigrant's tummy rumble. I don't know what it is. Butterflies in your stomach. Are people still looking at me differently? Not today, because I see all of you. Lots of familiar faces. And the dean made me feel very comfortable. But I have to tell you, wherever I go, I do have.
And I think it's also really interesting as a second-generation immigrant, having seen our grandparents and parents go through that, you do see that fear and that constant need to keep doing better. And I think even the next generation of immigrants are adopting that and also wanting that desire to succeed. But it's so great to hear. The toughest is the conversations with my daughters. Every time I tell them, you know, think of yourself as an immigrant, they go, why? We're not immigrants. You might have been, we're not. So we have this little chasm between us when we have these conversations. Yeah, no, I think I have the same with my dad very often, too. Just switching gears slightly, if we could move to some of your key drivers and some of the things that you really sacrificed. I think it was really apparent to us in the book that you have this sort of unrelenting sense of purpose, which really drove you in your career. And even with that purpose, you brought it into the way that you led Pepsi as well. But on the flip side of the purpose, you also sacrificed a lot. You sacrificed family life, you sacrificed your own personal, you talk about exhaustion in the book, and also missing loved one events. And one thing that I thought was particularly interesting was that you described the role of being Pepsi CEO as 3 full-time jobs. And then you described the role of being a mother, a wife, a daughter-in-law as also full-time jobs. Whilst balancing all these things, where do you think that sense of purpose came from for you, and how do you think it really drove you in your career?
Now, this is a sort of a statement for all of you. I had to do all that without technology. Had we had technology then, my life would have been much easier. I'll be honest with you. So don't get panicked about, oh my God, do we have to do all these jobs? Life's much more easier for you. So we're going to talk about how it's going to be easy for you. Easier, not easy. The problem is that I didn't view these as big challenges. I was actually energized by the fact that I had to juggle all these. I never balanced all this because they were never in a state of balance at any point in time. It was always juggling 5 things and hoping the balls didn't drop. That's all. And if they dropped, hope the least important ball dropped, and then we pick it up. But accidents happen, you miss something.
Yeah.
I built a huge support structure around me. I married the right guy. Critical lesson for all of you. Whoever you are, man or woman, marry the right person, because if you have the ground rules right up front, equality in the marriage, both are going to help support family building. Nobody's going to bring their crown in the garage, from the garage. Both are going to leave it in the garage. If you come in with that system, your spouse can be your biggest support, which is great. My multi-generational family all helped, it creates a set of issues, but if you can look beyond the issues, they can be a big help. Neighbors, people in the office, secretaries, would say, let us provide the extended support system for you. So, and then I had bosses. I had bosses who were incredible mentors. I don't even know how I lucked out this way. But I had a boss in PepsiCo, a CEO, who would say, okay, you have 1 daughter in boarding school, 1 daughter in the school close by. There's a problem in the boarding school. Raj is not home. I can go to the boarding school, take care of the problem. You take the other daughter home, or vice versa. What would you like to do? This is the CEO of the company saying, Indra, what would you like to do? Where would you like me to go? Deploy me. So when you have bosses like that, you realize that you can somehow manage through the biggest problems. And the other thing is that come 5 o'clock, kids were allowed to come to the office. I just said, hey, my kids are going to be roaming around the office because after 5, all bets are off. Remember, we didn't have hybrid working and all that stuff. So for us, there was the workplace and there was home. But come 5 o'clock, my little one would be running around the corridors, and I'd be off without my shoes. And she'd walk into executive offices and say, Mr. Kendall, he's the chairman emeritus. Mr. Kendall, do you have a minute to chat? And he'd say, sure, Tara, come on, sit down. And they'll be chatting, and I'll say, where is Tara? And then I look, and she and Don Kendall are having a Pepsi and chatting. So she'd walk into the CEO's office, and she'd pick a candy from the box. And she was a young kid when she joined, when I joined PepsiCo. The worst days was when I was president. I was doing so much, and she wanted permission to come to the office and hang around. So I said, come and do your homework in the office. So they wandered around. They knew all the executives. They'd chat with them. They'd chat back in return. But you have to build that kind of ecosystem. Yeah. And you should be allowed to do it because people realize you're such a huge contributor to the company that they want you, whatever you bring along with you. And I brought myself to work, and you asked me the first question about how did I keep my Indianness. My family was front and center. Yeah. My job was front and center, if you can believe it. They were all lined up with each other. Yeah. And so if my kids called, I took the call whatever I was doing. Whatever I was doing. Whatever,
And it's incredible, actually, because one of your first chapters is about family, and it's just such a consistent theme. And I love that you felt, so valued that you could walk and say, my daughters are coming in, and that's me. And there's actually a phrase in the book where you talk about, Like, that's the value of Indra. Like, if you want me, you take these rules. But really picking up on the mentors of your life, you had so many in the book, but just to name a few: Norman Wade, Gerard Schulmer, Roger Enrico, and Stephen Raymond. And what's really clear in the book is, even though they gave you a lot, you know, like you said, they were willing to drop your daughter off to school and do so many things to make it work for you, they also asked for a lot of sacrifice from you throughout your career. You know, you dropped a lot of things on the hat. You changed the way your career was coming out and panning out for their needs as well. But what was the sort of biggest thing you took away from your mentors and that sponsorship?
I mean, they were more than mentors. They were supporters. They were my promoters. They gave me stretch assignments, but they helped me get there. And then they showcased me in every possible way. They would put me in front of the board when I was not, you know, a board member, and you know, would give great compliments, you know, to me in front of the board to show that they truly valued my work. And they would never make a decision of anything of importance if I was not involved in the decision making. And so even if the men went off to play golf or fish or go hunting on the weekends, which I never did because I don't do any of those and I had kids to take care of, Roger would never make a decision with the boys because his point was, I don't want to incur her wrath, because if I made a decision, she has to implement it, and I don't want to take the chance of her saying it's a dumb decision. So we can talk about it, but let's go involve her before we make the decision. So he never, ever made a decision if I wasn't involved. I'm talking about almost everything except maybe people calls, which he got to make as a CEO. And so when you're part of that inner circle and included as a valuable member by leadership, you know, you give it your all. So it was a two-way relationship. He was a mentor, supporter, and I was the ideal mentee. So I grew and thrived under this mentorship and support, and they saw the results of their mentorship. So I think for all of us who are looking for mentors and supporters, it's a two-way relationship. Don't think it's a one-way relationship. If they give you advice and you choose not to take it, go back and tell them why you didn't take it. Mentors hate it when they give you advice and you just do whatever you want. So it's a two-way relationship, and that's what I had with all my supporters.
And I would love to pick up on your relationship with Roger, actually, because as you spoke about, he would take some of the male senior executives away for these weekends. And you say in the book that you were excluded because you were a woman. And specifically in the book, you say, for me, that was fine because I wanted more time at home. I was confident that Roger wouldn't pursue anything significant without me being consulted and involved, kind of to your point that you just made now. But also you recognized during that time that your pay and your stock options weren't in line with equivalent male executives. So how did those moments of you being distinguished or identified differently because of your gender impact your relationships with those mentors?
See, this is the cultural problem that comes into play, because where I came from, all the money I was getting already seemed like a lot of money. I'd never seen so much money in my life. So, yeah, I saw everybody else getting stock options, but I was just happy to be in the room. I was literally happy to be in the room. And in those days, because there weren't too many women and there wasn't any conversation about pay parity, none of that conversation was happening. You don't think about going and saying, hey, where are my stock options? I was getting paid well, so I just kept working. Now, let me also give you the flip side. Steve Reinemund becomes CEO. The first thing he does is makes a massive adjustment to everything I have. And I've never looked back because everybody treated me well after that. But you've got to understand the time, my cultural upbringing at that time, and I mean my cultural upbringing, and what I could and couldn't ask for at that time. Today, if my daughters didn't get their stock options, I'd be egging them on to go ask for it, but the right way, but then I didn't think I could.
And can I just pick up on what you just said, the right way? What would the right way be, do you think, now in the current context of business?
You know, having been a CEO, I don't know what the right way is from an employee perspective, but I'll give you a thought. If you are in sort of the middle management, okay, don't go directly to the boss and say, I need more money. Because if for some reason they can't give you the money, it sort of sours the environment. the best is go to HR first and have the conversation about why is it I am not getting paid what somebody else in the same job is getting paid, and make sure they show you the facts rather than just base it on hearsay. Say, let's look at the numbers. Let's look at everybody in the kind of job that I'm doing or the level that I'm at, what they're getting paid. Anonymize the numbers, but just share with me what it looks like and what my ratio is versus theirs.
And
because without the facts, don't go to your boss and say, I think I'm getting paid less.
Yeah, so I suppose your point there is make it a very objective criteria rather than the sort of more slightly subjective of I'm being paid less and approaching that directly.
And also, I think whether we like it or not, for some reason women are still considered too emotional or too pushy or too whatever. Even today, you don't want to get a badge. So you want to approach this very objectively, get the facts, then sit down with your boss and say, hey, these are the facts. And can we talk about it? And if the person says, I don't want to talk about it, then you know there's a tone at the top problem. That's a whole different discussion. But if you present somebody with the facts, I would say more often than not, they will talk to you about it.
Great, thank you. I'm going to move to your time as CEO. And you spent 12 very formative years as Pepsi CEO. And during that time, you did some really significant changes. Firstly, buying back the North American bottlers, continuing to diversify Pepsi portfolio, and really embracing new methods such as design to really increase the profitability of Pepsi. But I think the crown jewel in your time was really performance with purpose. And for those in the room who don't know what performance with purpose is, this was Indra's strategy, which had sort of 3 pillars to it. First was continue to nourish, so diversify Pepsi's portfolio for healthier foods. Secondly, to reduce environmental impacts and reduce water wastage. And lastly, cherish, and particularly cherish, the talent pipeline at Pepsi. I wondered how you decided to come to the origination of performance with purpose and why that was sort of the defining strategy for you.
PepsiCo is always about performance. So financial performance was a given. We had to get it done. But as I looked at the future of the food and beverage industry, so we looked at the mega trends over the next 10 years, 15 years, what are the big mega trends that are going to impact PepsiCo? And as we looked at the 10 mega trends, realized that the move towards health and wellness, an increasing focus on the environment, climate change, the war for talent, all of these were going to be big issues that were going to make or break PepsiCo. So if those are the issues, I know that it's going to take a while for us to change the company to future-proof it, put it that way. So rather than say, guys, we're going to have to future-proof the company, and these are the things we're going to do, we started with articulating the mega trends to everybody and saying, these are the trends that are going to impact PepsiCo and our industry. Do you buy into that? Once people bought into the framework of the mega trends and what the big things that could impact our industry are, they bought into the strategy. So it started with the direction, then the strategy, and then the actions. So when we had to make investments, when people questioned our investment levels, you go, wait a minute, do you agree to the mega trends? Yeah. If there's a health and wellness trend that's emerging, do you agree we should diversify the portfolio? Yes. If you're going to diversify the portfolio, we're going to have to do it through innovation or through acquisition. Do you agree with that? Yeah. So why are you disagreeing with the acquisition I'm making? So rather than pick on a step, link it back to a broader strategy. And if people have issues with the broader strategy, then you talk to them about why we have a difference of opinion. An example would be, people would say, are you Mother Teresa? Why do you have to change the portfolio? Just make soda and chips and you'll be fine. I'd look at them and say, have you changed your eating and drinking habits? Oh, absolutely. I eat healthy now. So let me make sure I understand. You've changed your eating and drinking habits, but you don't think PepsiCo should change its portfolio. Transform. I'm not getting away from the fun-for-you products. I just want to diversify it. Well, this is the part where I hope business schools teach this. Investors would say, if we want healthy products, we will invest in a healthy products company. We will be the diversifier. I said, then what happens to PepsiCo? You become a cash cow. But you know, growth is oxygen for companies. If you don't grow, your employees leave you because they want to be part of growth companies. You keep the energy of a company and the vitality of a company going because of growth. So if you're managing a company to be a cash cow, how many people are going to stick around?
And I really felt that you started thinking about performance for purpose and these sort of broad mega trends and future-proofing the company way before your competitors and way before a lot of businesses around the world. We're starting to see these trends now. Let's look beyond financial returns. Let's look at ourselves as companies and what we're doing for the world. And, you know, Indra, you were really ahead of your time when you were making some of these changes.
Well, it's not that I was sacrificing financial returns. I was just balancing level and duration of returns. People looked at, let's do a boom splat, you know, deliver a lot of returns, and then it's okay if it collapses. The next CEO can pick up the pieces. I was saying, hey, let me reinvest some of this boom money and create a lasting company which is delivering consistent returns over a long period of time. I thought that's how companies should be run. I didn't realize that boom splat was an option. Clearly, many companies think. In fact, some people have written a book about when you're a CEO, the first thing you should do is take a massive reset. Just say the previous CEO did everything wrong. And just say you have to invest a whole bunch of money. That's the splat part. And then you'll get 7 years to ride alpha. That's the boom part. And then you retire and the next CEO takes a reset. That is the worst way to run a company.
And that must be, Indra, why you were Pepsi's CEO for 12 years, where the average CEO is only 5 years.
But remember, I did either 2 6-year terms or 3 4-year terms,
okay.
because the first 6 years I had the financial crisis to globalize the company and then deal with the bottling crisis. So that was my first 6 years. The second, and then put in all the new capabilities for performance with purpose, design, R&D. So big investment years. We were still delivering, but investment years. The second years were getting the return from those investments. So I feel like I was reborn a couple of times as a CEO.
I want to quickly go to this point that you did whilst you were CEO. You wrote to all the parents of your most senior executives, thanking those parents for, you know, the things that they've given their children so that they can come and, you know, work for you and do so well at Pepsi. And that had a huge impact on your senior executives, and they wrote to you thanking you for that. How important did you find humanizing the role of the CEO? And how did that impact your leadership style versus other?
So I'll tell you a story today, and then I'll go back to that story. I get a lot of calls from male CEOs these days saying, can you send me a sample of the letter that you wrote to the parents? Okay? And then I get a call back saying, you won't believe the reaction I got. Okay? So that's today. I mean, last week I was sending out draft letters. Go back a little bit. David Rubenstein wrote a book about summarizing a whole bunch of interviews he did with leaders, how leaders lead. And he put mine in the first book because of this one thing about writing to parents. Let me ask you a show of hands. How many of your parents would like getting a letter from your boss saying you're doing a great job? Okay. You see, we rest our case right there. All right? Here's the problem. Once we turn 18, we don't get a report card on the kids because by law, you're not allowed to send report cards to them. You're not required to, okay? If the child shows you the report card, it's okay. So you just, I'll speak of my parents, they'll just pray. Hope she's doing okay. Hope they're doing, you know, contributing to society. Many of our parents are doing the same thing, okay? Yeah. They're just appealing to a divine being to make sure that things are going well. And the only evidence that they're doing well is that they haven't read anything bad about you in social media, right? It's by 1 minus x, not the x itself, all right? To put it in simple terms. So in my case, when I became CEO, most of the people in India didn't congratulate me. They congratulated my mother in front of me. You did a good job. You prayed enough. You fasted enough. That's why your daughter turned out right. So you must be the one to be congratulated. So I came back and I said, yeah, you know, they're probably right, you know. So what if I assumed it's 100% right? So let me write to the parents of my direct reports and say, thank you to the parents for the gift of their son or daughter. So I wrote a very personal letter to each of the parents of my reports, and I met every one of them personally. I went to various cities in the world and met them personally, just my direct reports. Then the next groups, about 400 when I was through with PepsiCo, I wrote to the parents. Every time I did a leadership program or people got moved up, I wrote to the parents. And the first time their photograph comes in the annual report, I would blew up that picture, send it to the parents with a lovely note so they could hang it up on There was.
And I love that at one point, the senior executives, when they go home, they kept saying, you know, their parents asked them, oh, how's Indra? Indra,
Always,
my friend.
first question.
You know, like,
First question, not how are you, it's like, how's my friend Indra? It's always my friend Indra.
I love that.
So, you know, look, it worked out well. I did it because I felt I had to say thank you. I felt a debt of gratitude to them. I had an outstanding team. So I felt I had to express my debt of gratitude. I will say to all of you, today, the number of male and underline male executives writing to the parents of the people that work for them is increasing. I'd say in the last year, maybe 10 or 12 male executives have written, and they are just blown away by the reaction they're getting from their.
And I think I know my dad would love that letter as well. So I think it makes sense, right? That we think of people beyond just being an employee, but think of them as people who have come and really worked hard and come from a place.
The head of HR for our Middle East said that his dad, who lives in a big apartment building in Delhi, took the letter and pulled the chair up at the entrance to the apartment building. And every member of the apartment that came in, he gave them a copy of the letter and said, I want you to know what my chairman, or what PepsiCo chairman thinks of my son. And, you know, surprising. I said, were you embarrassed, Pawan? He goes, no, felt good.
I actually want to turn to one of the stories about when you received president of PepsiCo. And
don't go to that story. It's boring.
I think we have to, Indra. I'm
so
sorry.
Many times.
I actually recalled this story to my husband about a year ago because I thought it was such an interesting story. But Indra is appointed Pepsi president, and she is driving home. It's 10 p.m. She rocks up at the door, and her mother opens it. And Indra's so excited to tell her mum and her family and her kids this news. And her mum says, please turn around and go get some milk. And Indra's kind of infuriated in this moment and says, well, my husband's been home for hours. Why didn't you ask my husband to go get milk? And she said, you may be the president or whatever of PepsiCo, but when you come home, you are a wife and a mother and a daughter. Nobody can take your place, so you can leave that crown in the garage.
Don't clap.
This moment, obviously, and this story, as you said, has been retold to you many times, and has had a really big impact, obviously, in the way that you've thought about your time. And just looking back at that quote, you know, how did that make you feel? And looking back on, you know, your achievements and all the things that you've done, as well as that sort of tug and sense of guilt you have sometimes felt as well. How do you look back on those years and reflect back on that time?
Well, at that point, she should have let me celebrate for a brief moment. But, you know, she's an Indian mother. I can't do much. You cannot argue.
Hear you. Yeah.
But in retrospect, I think it was a very valuable lesson in humility. It's a lesson to say that, you know, at work, you're fungible. Somebody can take your place. You can lose your job tomorrow, especially when you're a senior executive or a CEO. As a CEO, the board can fire you at no notice. 15 minutes notice, they can call you and say you're out, and you just pack your bags and leave. So the job is temporary for us. But at home, that's all we have. Going back to our first thing about family, many of us are the backbone of family.
Yeah.
And I just go further now to say, she told me to leave the crown in the garage. She said, well, your husband came in at 8, he was tired, so I didn't want to bother him, okay? But I think both members of both parents, husband and wife, should leave their crown in the garage. It's not that one person leaves it in the garage and the other person walks in and says, look at my crown. Yeah. I think both should leave the crown in the garage, and when you come home, assume the new roles. As my kids often remind me, Mom, we don't work for you. I know that. I mean, in my home, I don't get an inch of leeway. If I say, can you get me something? They'll say, please. I go, I'm just telling you kids, why should I say please? We don't work for you, Mom. So, Preeta, please, can you get me a glass of water or milk? You know, so I'm learning, you know, all of these words at home, only because, you know, normally parents talk to their kids in a direct way, but my kids, they just want to make sure there's a clear differentiation between Mom, the CEO, and mom, the mom.
Yeah.
And they teach me humility, just as my mother did.
And I've loved reading about Peter and Tara, and you really open up about their experiences, seeing you as a mother, but also Pepsi's CEO. At one point, you actually said, you kind of thought that they wished there was two of you, at all times. And sort of drilling down on something that you're so passionate about, and I imagine this comes from, some of those balls that you were juggling, was, the care crisis that is coming upon the US, but also a lot of the aging populations in aging economies. And you talk often about how we say we want to get minority groups up the ladder, we say we want to get women up corporate ladders, but we're not giving them the care they need. And like you sort of said before, you were really lucky to have extended family and people there helping you with your kids. But how would you like care to change in order to support those people getting up the ladder?
So this brings us full circle back to why I wrote this book. It was never intended to be a memoir. I was just not that kind. I actually was going to write a bunch of policy papers on care. And people said nobody will read them, or it won't be sticky. And the only way to make it memorable is if you inform it with the arc of your life. So if you notice, this is not a tell-all memoir with salacious stories, nothing. This is just a factual journey with lessons, and then we go into the care crisis. Twofold issue. One, when I stepped down, people said, why don't you replace yourself with a woman? Remember, 8.5% of Fortune 500 companies are run by women. They always ask women, why don't you replace yourself with a woman? The other 92% of men, they never ask them, why did you replace yourself with a woman? I've never understood that. But that's how it is. I said, look, I've produced a lot of women who've gone on to run companies in America. But they leave at the senior middle management level because the pyramid narrows so much, they don't want to go through that last bit of hell to become a CEO, because it's a slog. But then as I started to dig deeper, the pipeline was broken. We had a lot of women who entered PepsiCo. The first and second levels, they were in large numbers, more than 50% at times, and then there was a big drop-off. So when people were considering having families, etc., they just dropped out of the workforce. Okay.
And could you also touch upon the point, Indra, that you made in your book when you were looking at the pipeline, and you did a review of 200 performance reviews, men and women, and you noticed something between the difference.
We'll come to that.
Elaborating on that,
women dropped out. So why did the women drop out? One, when they had children, they didn't know how to juggle home and work because there was not a care infrastructure that existed for them. The second, inside companies, and PepsiCo is better than most, was better, is better than most. Performance appraisals are somewhat skewed against women. For example, I noticed that performance appraisals of women said, this woman did fantastic, she delivered on all her goals, but there's a problem with her potential. With the man, it would be, he did pretty good on all his objectives, but he's got huge potential. So for some reason, the woman's potential was a problem. For some reason, so her potential was a problem, her performance was great. For the man, the performance was a problem, but the potential was great. I never understood this and but phenomenon. Yeah. So I knew that that was also wearing women down. And we had to address a lot of these issues, because if you continue with this and but phenomenon, you strip women of confidence, which affects their competence, and it's a doom loop. So we knew we had to address that. But we had to systematically change things in PepsiCo to keep women. But I found something much worse when I was co-chairing Reopen Connecticut during the pandemic, because a public epidemiologist and I were the co-chairs for Connecticut. We found that all the frontline workers, the nurses, the teachers, the caregivers, the people who worked in senior homes, people who worked in retail, some hospitality that was open, all the women had children or caregiving responsibilities at home. But yet when they came into the senior care center, we asked them to stay for 2 or 3 weeks before they went back because of the quarantine issues. Yeah. They couldn't go home every day. But we never talked about who's going to take care of your kids, who's going to take care of the seniors in your home. Yeah. We never had that conversation. All of a sudden, we call these frontline workers essential workers. You notice? We all call them essential. Just the words changed. And at 7 o'clock, we all clap for them. Yeah. But we never talked about What childcare system do we need to give those people? All of that stuff. So now fast forward post-COVID. The white-collar workers can talk about hybrid work, can talk about remote working. We have technology tools. But those frontline workers have no choice. They have to show up at work every day.
How are we supporting them?
Right. We're now talking about stressed out mothers, especially in white-collar jobs, who had to juggle all these caregiving responsibilities, but from their home. But these frontline workers have to go into schools and hospitals and care centers and retail workers and hotels and work, but nobody's talking about the support structure for them. So if we don't build a very good childcare system and a senior care system, but a childcare system for the frontline worker in particular, we're not going to have the backbone of people who hold up the economy. And for very senior people in the C-suite, don't worry about childcare. They can take care of it. They can afford to pay for it. The entry level plus another 2 levels, if you don't worry about a care system for those people and for the frontline workers, we are looking at a disastrous scenario where either we will have very few children being born and a birth rate that puts the future of the countries in jeopardy, or we would end up with incredible stress on the mothers in particular, but young family builders, but mothers too, and then you'll have a lot of them leaving the workforce. None of these options are good.
And that's a really important lesson actually for the people in this room, because I think we often think about the fact that we probably will be going to those white-collar jobs and we're stressed out about our own care circumstances. But actually, we need to think about the companies that hopefully we'll be running one day and how frontline workers are really going to be supported. I'm going to wrap up there on our formal questions, because I know we want to give at least 5 or 10 minutes to the audience to ask questions. But before I do, can you, and I know how unoriginal this question is, but can you give a final piece of advice to any business student that you think after they leave LBS of what you would want them to take with them?
As we were talking with the dean, whatever job you take up, please ask yourself the question, how does it make a positive impact on society? Money at all costs used to be the mantra. It should not be the mantra going forward. It should be the work that I'm doing, is it going to negatively impact society? Not today, even if it's in 2 or 3 years. We were talking about examples like CDOs that were developed during the financial crisis that brought the world down, the world's financial system down. Everybody who designed it knew it was going to bring the world down. Yeah, okay, but a bunch of smart MBAs designed it and then got out of it before everybody else was left holding the bag. So think ahead as to the consequences of what you're going to be doing. Second, put your hand up for the toughest assignments. Don't take the easy assignments. Nobody will remember you for doing the easy jobs. But if you took on a tough assignment and demonstrated your mettle, people are going to say, this is somebody I want to keep an eye on. The third big piece of advice, every entity has politics. Understand the politics, but don't play in the politics. Because the minute you play in the politics, you become a political person, as opposed to somebody who understands the politics and navigates it.
Yeah, I really like that.
Those are the 3 business lessons. On a personal side, I say this always, think hard about time. We all have very little time in our lives, and think hard about where you want to allocate that time. I didn't have too many luxuries in terms of technology and flexibility. You all have it. Think hard about where you're spending the time. How much time social mediaing and how much time binge watching versus time that you spent on human interactions. So think hard about all that. It's your choice.
Thank you, Indra.
Welcome.
I'm now going to open questions to the floor. If you could just raise your hand, and then one of our volunteers will come and give you a mic. Vale, feel free to choose whoever. Thank you. Great.
Thank you so much for your talk. That was really, really nice. My name is Shivangi. My question for you is around what you talked about a little bit earlier. So you said juggling a lot of tasks and juggling a lot of balls, it gave you energy, and that's how you kept it up. My question is how you sustain that energy, because I feel like in the work so far already, I feel like I've done that, and I do feel a little bit exhausted when you're trying to prove your your name in that space and why you exist. So how did you manage that energy and sustain it?
I don't
Thank
know. I genuinely don't know, because when I was writing this book, I was tired reading about myself, okay? Because I have no idea where I got that energy. Even coming to London, going through British Airways and coming here, I just thought about the trips I took, the hundreds of trips, many of them commercial flights before I had the luxury of the private plane. But hours of wait in airports, you know, flying economy at times, business class. Now you fly first class and feel great about it. But the way we slog through all that while writing decks, you know, in the airport every minute and calling kids at home, I have no idea where I got the energy. However, I will tell you, at different points when I did feel tired, what I'd say to myself is, I don't have a choice. The only thing I can give up is the job. But the job gives me such satisfaction, keeps me energized. I'm not going to give up the job. The rest of it I can't give up because everybody counts on me. So I summon all kinds of reserves. And the fact that I didn't sleep much helped a lot. That was nothing to do with practice, just a genetic problem. So that I got an extra 3 or 4 hours a day, which other people didn't get. And, you know, little tricks, speed reading, you know, something from the time I was a kid, I got used to it. That helped a lot. So, you know, it's very easy to go through a deck in 1/3 the time that somebody else did and retain it. Those are all trainable skills. You just have to find those skills. Now, you know what? With Get Abstract now, you don't even have to read books. Everybody's digested everything for you. So you have a lot of shortcuts you can take to your work. Use technology wisely and just power through life. And then decide what you're willing to give up. That's your choice.
Thank you
I
so
am
much.
not a good role model for this. Sorry.
No, thank you so much. It's been an honor.
Thank you. I think we'll take a question from this side. Chi, if you could just hand the mic.
Hi, thank you so much. My question is about, I know that Pepsi has a very storied HR function, a lot of great HR leaders. I worked with Monique Harena this summer, and I was wondering kind of what you think is part of the core of Pepsi's culture and that function that differentiates it, and how it worked with the rest of the business to be seen as a leader and respected.
Yeah. You know, HR, when you have a very good HR function, there are two points of view inside the company. Division presidents will sometimes say, HR is trying to run the company. Okay? Other times they'll say, we have a very good HR function, thank God. HR has to be strong, but they should not try to run the company, defined as they shouldn't be telling the division presidents exactly who they should be hiring or firing. They should provide frameworks. They should provide approaches. They should be providing rules that we will not violate in terms of people hiring, management. But they shouldn't have such a heavy hand that it looks like HR is controlling the agenda. Let me give you an example of what I mean. Actually, a recruit pointed this out to us. We were recruiting somebody for a senior middle management position. And when that person came to interview with me, because it was an important strategic hire, this person said to me, you know, I had 8 interviews, 6 were with HR people. What the hell's going on in your company? You know, we never even thought about it, but we gave HR so much power that basically they controlled most of the recruiting interviews. So we changed that and said no more than 2 HR people if somebody's going to, or 20% of the interviews can be with HR people. So you've got to be very, very careful about the HR function. You must have an excellent HR function, but don't let them have too much power, because then it creates a feeling that something other than the line managers are controlling the business, which is a bad image to have. Can we take one question here that had on? Somebody here had a hand up very early. Yeah.
Is that the right one?
Hi, thanks. My name is Anshuman, and I probably agree with you on the time aspect that you mentioned, because I believe all of us have 24 hours, you, me, the rest of my batchmates, and it's what you do with it defines where you go. Probably, so the question I'm going to ask you is, the two actually, so I'll just go for it. First is, you know, juggling all these various aspects of life. How do you manage that most important aspect of time for yourself? Do you know, look back, reflect and say, I need to improve this, or I need to work on this? And the second aspect is, what was your mantra to happiness amongst managing all these challenges through life?
My mantra for what?
Happiness.
Happiness. Okay, and I'm going to say something that's going to be like, oh, so cliched, but that's okay, all right? I'm just going to tell you.
It's allowed.
The happiest moments for me was when I was sitting on my bed with my 2 kids hanging off of my legs almost, because they put their books and do their homework, and I'm watching each of their homework to see if they're doing it right. And I had TV on mute watching my Yankees play baseball. That was happiness for me, because I had complete control over my ecosystem. My kids were right there. I was supervising them. They felt connected to mom, even though mom was doing her PepsiCo work. Doesn't matter, but you know, she was also involved in us. Those were the happiest moments for me. I didn't need my time. Maybe I'd have been a better person if I'd had my time. I don't know. I never had my time. I've never had my time in my whole life. And even if somebody told me you've got 10 days, it's your time, I wouldn't know what to do. I'll give you a great example. I told my team, Simi and Lisa, I said, I'm taking 2 weeks off in December to just disappear. I need to take my time, okay? So my kids came, Mom, where are you disappearing to? I said, I'm disappearing. I'm not going to tell you where I'm going, but I'm disappearing. They said, just tell us quietly, okay? So which means tell us. So I'm planning this fabulous trip just by myself. Last week I said, well, it'll be even more fabulous if my husband and kids came along.
But I think
now it's gone. It's over, because now they're going to decide where we're going, what we're going to do every day, every activity. And on top of that, mom becomes a punching bag. If anything doesn't go right, it's mom's problem. And so I'm saying to myself, what is happiness? If I go by myself, every minute of the day I'm going to be wondering what the kids are doing. My kids are all grown up, but I'm going to worrying about what the kids are doing. What's Raj up to? Okay, that's all I'll worry about all the time.
you might be a bit bored as well without them.
No, I'll take books. I'll take like 25 books and read them. But I concluded, much to my dismay, that I'm better off having happiness even with being the punching bag if these people are around me, because at the end of the day, that is all that matters for me. I could lose all my money, but these 3 people are there for me. So you have to decide, what is that one thing in your life that gives you utter happiness? Even though it comes with pain. Happiness always comes with pain. What's the one thing? And then you balance your life that way.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I think we have time for one more question. Indra, if you'd like to choose whichever hand.
Oh, I chose.
The pressure. I think one from the back, actually, considering they haven't had a chance. Yeah, great.
Hi, my name is Krati. Thank you so much. Before I ask my question, I would really like to tell that when I was growing up, you were my role model. And that was true for a lot of Indian girls when they were growing up. So it has truly been an honor to be here. My question is, I wanted to know that if you get a chance to restart your career, is there anything you would do differently?
In today's terms, I mean, in today's world.
Yeah.
What would I do differently? I don't know, you know, every failure I've had, I learn from it. In fact, I think I'm a stronger person because of the failures. And again, if you look at a failure as the world has come to an end as opposed to, it's a learnable moment or a teachable moment, it's a much better outcome. You know, I married the right guy, so that's okay. The kids are okay. I'm trying to see my checklist. Kids are okay. What would I have done differently? I don't know. I mean, look, I know the balance sheet of my life, right? And as I look on balance at the balance sheet, I'm comfortable with all the assets I've built, and I'm aware of the liabilities I have and how I've offset them with assets. So I have my own life's balance sheet, and I'm comfortable with it all. And if I'd had today's technologies, my kids wouldn't say, wish you'd been around more, because I would have communicated with them via FaceTime or Zoom whenever, and I wouldn't have traveled as much because I would have Zoomed more with my people around the world. So I might have had the reverse problem when my kids say, can't you disappear for some time? I threatened to decrapify their rooms and they go, just disappear, Mom, please, where would you like to travel? So I think the reverse problem might have happened. But no, I'm happy with my life.
Cool, thank you.
I think that's a sign of a really, really good life. If I could just welcome Marka to the stage, who's one of our co-presidents, to do the final thank you.
Yeah.
So thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Thank you, Indra, for making the time. We just wanted to take this small moment to thank Indra on behalf of Women in Business Club and on behalf of everyone. We know many of you, especially women, have written their applications to LBS based on Indra, so it is super exciting to have you here. As we come to a close, I, on behalf of Women in Business Club, wanted to extend our gratitude to all of you for attending such an amazing event. Months ago, it sounded almost impossible to host this event. After 1.5 years of an ongoing pandemic, it has been sensational to have you all here at this bustling, now-filled hall. Indra, thank you so much for coming to LBS today to share remarkable bits of your life in full. Especially thank you for being such an inspiration to all of us who want to be the change that women bring to the world of business in the coming years. We have bought this token of appreciation for you to enjoy as you continue on your busy tour. Please, Chiarita. And as last reminder to everyone, if you're posting on any social media, any social network, please tag Indra and Women in Business Club. Super appreciate that. And now we please welcome everyone to leave the hall through the back doors. Thank you.